Classically Trained, Episode 21. And welcome to the Classically Trained podcast, the podcast for life and leadership lessons from video games. And I'm your host, John D. Harrison. Well, you are in for a special treat today. I have an interview that I had the opportunity and pleasure to conduct with Mr. Brent Black, aka Brentalfloss of the With Lyrics fame. So if you haven't had a chance to check out one of the With Lyrics series, I strongly encourage you to do so. Brent has a great way of putting a lot of creativity, energy, and passion into creating lyrics for many older video game songs and themes that never did have them. Now, just a little heads up on that, some of his tunes are not safe for work, but today's episode is definitely rated T for teen. So be advised as the time and place you choose to listen, but I guarantee you'll get a lot of fun and laughs out of some of his many great tracks and creativity that he's put out there. So be sure to check his YouTube channel out. You can just search for Brentalfloss, and you can also find his music as well. So he has that available on iTunes and Bandcamp. Without any further introduction, let's go ahead and check out this interview with Brent Black, aka Brentalfloss. Brent Brentalfloss Black is a comedian, musician, and gamer. He first gained notoriety when he added lyrics to the title theme from Mega Man 3 and created the With Lyrics series on YouTube. He has since grown a YouTube subscriber base of nearly 300,000 and released 3 full-length albums, which have reached the top 10 in both the Bandcamp and iTunes comedy charts. Currently lives in New York City and performs at music venues and gaming conventions in the USA, Canada, and the UK. Please welcome to the show, Brentalfloss.
Hi, how's it going?
Fantastic. How are you, sir?
I'm great. I'm wonderful.
Well, it's a real pleasure having you on the Classically Trained podcast. I want to launch right into one of my favorite questions here. Can you tell me something that you have learned about life from video games?
Multitasking. Particularly when I was about 10 years old and I picked up Final Fantasy IV, which was called Final Fantasy II back in my day when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And in some parts of the game, you're doing these huge boss battles with 5 different people in your party. And I mean, I was 10 years old and I had to start thinking in terms of damage control while I'm still beating the bad guy and making sure everybody has enough MP. And, I actually remember trying to explain this to a teacher of mine at the time. And when I was 10, 1994, adults were not so ready to accept the idea that video games could teach you life skills. So she was very skeptical, but I just totally pounded. I was like, no. I now know how to do 2 things at once because of Final Fantasy II. So that's a moment that stands out for me.
Well, I definitely know about you because of your Brentalfloss persona, and most prominently from your With Lyrics series. I did first run across your Mega Man 3 With Lyrics. So can you talk a little bit about how that whole thing got started?
Well, I'd like to say that it was some God-ordained thing that I had a totally perfect plan for, but it was actually kind of a lucky mistake. I went to grad school for musical theater writing, which is sort of like Hogwarts, very weird program at NYU. And right after graduating, I taught a summer program called Let's Make a Musical. So I was working 3 hours a day, and I was in this random apartment in Ardmore, Oklahoma, of all places, which is a teeny-weeny little town. And I had very little to do. And I'm sitting there teaching kids every day how to write lyrics and how to attach lyrics to tunes that already exist and vice versa. And the Mega Man 3 title theme has always been one of my favorites, not just a favorite video game tune, but I'd put it up against the Moonlight Sonata, Mozart's Eine Kleine Nacht music. To me, it is one of those pieces of music that just is eternal. And I just started writing lyrics to it, and it was totally just a funny little thing that I thought would, amuse myself. I happened to have just gotten a MacBook Pro. It had a better editing program than I'd had previously. It had a built-in camera, and I just was messing around with the editor and put this little video together. And it's funny because I've had all kinds of artists that I've come across that are successful say, like, don't do the thing you think they want. Do the thing that you like, because if you like it, they'll like it. And I always was like, yeah, whatever. Like, they're going to get into the nerdy thing I'm into. And yet it was absolutely correct here. And even though I had done 25 videos on YouTube trying to be something that I wasn't, or to create a brand that didn't have to do with me, but it was what I thought people wanted to see, suddenly this thing was outdoing any video I'd ever done within a day and getting posted all around. So I could see the way the wind was blowing, and I was like, let me just keep trying this. And that was summer 2008. And by the time I released an album in summer 2010 and it charted, and that was around the same time I had an off-Broadway show that flopped, I kind of went, okay, the universe is laying out a pretty clear path, and I'm going to listen. So that's the short version. Not that short, but shorter than it could be, of how the lyrics
No, that's
started.
pretty incredible. These two conflicting ideas that you've really managed to connect really well. It's amazing when you watch it, because it just seems to work. Just totally works in your approach. So you can tell that you've got a background in the two areas that matter most. So you talked a little bit about how you got there. You kind of just fell into it. What's your background on the music side? And then if you could contrast that to your background with video games and the subject matter.
Well, it's interesting that they're very much connected for me. My first 10 years or 11 years of life, my parents decided to put me in Montessori schools, which was fine. And the point being, it wasn't ever in my neighborhood. So I didn't really have neighborhood kid friends or friends from school nearby. So it was a lot of me just making my own fun after school. And I started playing video games with the original NES system around age 4, and that became an absolute obsession. And then a couple of years later, I just sort of started playing piano pretty randomly. I was watching the trailer for the movie My Girl, which is probably lost to time, but the song by The Temptations, My Girl, is not. And I just was like, my sister had a toy piano, and I had it stuck in my head, and I was like, I'm going to figure out how this goes. And sitting there with one finger, like, bing, 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 boom, bing, bing. And I was so proud of myself, age 8 or so. And so pretty soon, I got a keyboard for my birthday, because I begged and begged to get a little keyboard like Yamaha type, the cheapy one that you see mostly plastic. And suddenly Nintendo and the piano were my two favorite things to do when I wasn't at school. And that slowly eked into when I was at school. I wrote stories and songs that had to do with that kind of stuff. And most of that's lost because I didn't keep, the manuscripts. So they really grew together. And even though, video games actually, I slowly fell away from the 3 hours a day of video games as I entered college. At some point, the average person has a hard time keeping up that kind of regimen. But in high school, I started writing original musicals, and in college, I did more of that. Then went to grad school for musical theater writing. So for me, music was never really a thing that was taught to me formally, if you don't count like boys choir, like the actual nitty gritty of music. It wasn't formal training. It was me just experimenting and seeing what I could come up with, and slowly learning songs that I knew, learning how to use both hands, learning how chords worked, and on and on and on, to the point where I was doing original songs and original lyrics. And I think that my parents were smart to never put me in lessons, because then it would have become like school. It would have become oppressive and something for me to fight against. Whereas it was actually for me more of a refuge, more of the thing that I escaped my crappy, school life, and went straight to the piano, and I could, do whatever I wanted there. So they grew together. And what's interesting is I don't say this very often, because I think that there's a lot of times gamers want to make sure that you're one of them, or that you're authentically a gamer. To me, the most enthusiastic gaming time of my life was as a child. And I think that that's why so much of my work as Brentalfloss sort of points to nostalgia, and points to the wonder, and also the questions you have when you're a kid. You don't quite understand what's going on in the game, but it's the only thing you got from Blockbuster that weekend, so you're going to play it. So in a weird way, the gaming and nerdy side of me that I tried to kind of play down as I became an adult, and tried to kind of cool my way out of that, came back to haunt me, and went almost like the zombie hand coming out of the graveyard, like, no, we're pulling you back. And so now, my nerdy childhood has morphed together with my artistic, well, if you want to call it artistic, but my creative pursuits of young adulthood, and those skill sets and knowledge bases have really come together to form the basis of what I make the Brentalfloss videos out of.
Well, and those have done really quite well. I noticed I was poking around on your blog, and you recently had the opportunity to give some advice to another aspiring YouTuber who was kind of asking you, I think the question he asked you is, how do you get a video to go viral? And I thought you gave some outstanding advice that was really on point. So if you wouldn't mind sharing some of that, how do you answer a person who says, what do I do to make my content, make my video go viral?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that viral as a concept is actually a trap. And this is something nobody wants to hear, because every 10-year-old with their dad's iPhone trying to get a sweet ollie shot off of I don't even know skateboarding. I don't know why that came up. The point is that every person thinking they want to go viral, they imagine that suddenly they're famous. But a viral video kind of makes you this flavor of the week. And then that's your brand forever, even if you didn't want it to be. Chris Crocker, who had a big splash like 5 or 10 years ago with Leave Britney Alone, he's actually got a lot more to say than just that. I'm not a huge fan or anything, but he did comedy and satire and talked about stuff and blogged. But that made him the Leave Britney Alone guy. Tay Zonday, who wrote Chocolate Rain, he keeps on writing songs. But does anybody really care the way they cared about Chocolate Rain? The list goes on. The Gangnam Style guy. He's probably so rich by now he doesn't have to worry about it. But if he ever wanted to do a serious album, and what if that was his one song that he ever did that was really like that? And it turned out he really wanted to do more serious stuff, but he can't because he's the Gangnam Style guy. This is the trap of viral. Viral sort of uses you, chews you up, spits you out very quickly. And while at certain levels of viral you may make a lot of money, it doesn't really lead to an ongoing brand the way that somebody who's sort of, got more of like a local band type model to what they do. And more importantly, as far as anybody that wants to be big on YouTube or the internet in general, the trick is to not copy. I did so many videos where I was trying to copy things I'd seen. I was trying to copy the guy that played a certain Nintendo song on the piano. I was trying to copy people that did political rants, but I was trying to be them. And the thing is, they already are them. So when I hear 10-year-olds at conventions going, oh, I'm totally going to be the next JonTron, it's like, well, you might go far, but no one will be the next JonTron or the next AVGN because they will be themselves. So the trick is to find whatever you have in your own skill set that makes something that only could be done by you. My little metaphor for this is that everybody creatively is like an incomplete kitchen. Maybe I've got a spatula and a mixing bowl and a cookie sheet, and you've got, an electric mixer and a couple of plates or whatever. And each kitchen that we have creatively unto ourselves has a certain amount of ingredients. And so invariably, the best thing that somebody's going to do on the internet, almost invariably, is whatever thing that only they could make with their skill set. And I think that's evident with me having tried to do all this stuff other people did, but only when I combined my, I think a generous word would be unique musical theater sensibilities with video game knowledge and comedy. Only when I did that was it something that felt like it was its own thing that hadn't been done. And even though, it's kind of like Weird Al, I like this, it's kind of like that. It is its own unique flavor, and it's like whatever you can do to make what you do in a way that only you could do it. That, I think, is actually the key to being successful in any artistic endeavor, particularly on the internet. I hope that wasn't the longest answer of all time.
It was close, but I think you're good. No, that's good stuff. So let me ask you this. I noticed that you have branched out. It's not like you've really pigeonholed yourself. You definitely have your with lyrics, but you have a lot of other things going on in the meantime in different ways of delivering this. You're not limited just to YouTube. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other projects you have going on? And also, I'm curious, I want to get inside your mind and get the idea of how do you decide which is the right things to take on versus something that's just, I'll pass.
Okay, those are two big questions, but I'll see if I can blow through them. The first one was to do with – actually, let me answer the second one first and then rope back around. the thing about choosing a property to do it with lyrics about is there's a couple different things I'm always looking for, and if I can get enough of them, I'll do it. Number one, is the song really catchy? I rarely do a song if it doesn't get stuck in my head, because if it doesn't get stuck in my head, how can I expect it to get stuck in their head? Does the game have what I call character and quirk? Character and quirk is just a matter of like enough things that are interesting about it that if you look at them in kind of a slightly askew manner, suddenly they're really funny. This was the problem with me in Metroid for a long time. I couldn't figure out what was funny about Metroid. Big fans of mine will know that I ended up trying to do something not funny with Metroid, and it was kind of a flop, but that's a different story. That said, there's also, if I can figure out an overarching concept that is a way to look at the game that nobody ever has. And I don't actually always pull that off. Like Tetris with Lyrics was my first big mega hit, and the whole concept was women like Tetris, which is arguable and debatable, but everybody who watched that, enough of them saw a grain of truth. Oh yeah, my grandma loves Tetris, my girlfriend loves Tetris, whatever it was, that it worked. And like with Castlevania 2 with Lyrics, the concept is it's kind of weird that you're going around collecting body parts of a guy to put him back together to kill him again. It kind of wrote itself. So if a game has that enough of those different parts, I'll usually do it. But sometimes, try as I might, I just can't find a way to make something come to life in a way that feels worth it. I played The Secret of Monkey Island about a month or two ago, and I love the game. And I may well have an idea for it, but I couldn't find the right tune that felt like it was reflecting something about the game, and I couldn't nail down the concept that I wanted, and it just kind of fell by the wayside. And so it's a difficult thing. And if I felt more pressure to like crank out videos all the time, regardless of quality, I'd probably just take on everything and then just crap it out. But the thing is that once you've been doing YouTube videos long enough, people almost seem like they're kind of waiting to be able to say, oh, you used to be cool, but you never want to be in your Star Trek Next Generation season 7. You never want to get to season 7 ever. And part of how I refuse to ever get into season 7 is not doing every project that pops into my head, which makes for a lot less videos throughout the year, but I'd like to think it makes them all a little bit better on average. And I actually forgot the first question that was like the first half of this one.
That's okay. It was the other projects that you're working on, things outside of the with lyrics. What else are you doing, and what are some other formats outside of YouTube that you're sharing your content?
Mostly lately it's writing video game music. I got really obsessed with it about a year ago because the short version is a friend of mine hooked me up with a company that I guess I can say it now because why not? It's the company Terminal Reality. They made Blood Rain. They made one of the Walking Dead games. They really were a pretty major developer, and they were working on a game. And he basically suggested that I might write some dialogue and the music. And I was like, this close. We were negotiating the money I was going to be paid, and then all the investors pulled out. The company went belly up, and everybody left to other jobs. And I was like, oh my God, I was so close. But I realized in the process of writing the spec material for that gig how much I really loved writing video game music, and it seemed like this poetic way to come full circle. Like the guy who loved video game music enough to add lyrics is now making video game music. So I've written music for a game called Default Dan. I started writing music for a game called Flavored Cats that was going to be on the Wii U. That fell through, but I still got some good tunes out of it. At this point, I couldn't find a way to make it work as a business model to just do video game music, because most of the projects coming across my desk were extremely indie. And, even though I gave them a good deal from the outset, they were like, could we shave that down to like half that? So I couldn't make it work, but I'm open to major developers or people that their game has buzz or just an amazing concept to come to me and ask me to write the music for that, which is always fun. For instance, there's a game called Chicken Nights that, frankly, probably nobody will ever see because it's extremely indie. But when they explained to me, it's called Chicken Nights, knights in shining armor, and they're chickens. And I just went, I know how to do that. And basically, half of the score is me just like that's, and it just was perfect. But there's that. I'm working long term on some ideas for original video games. But the thing is, YouTube has a way of needing you to keep making content for YouTube, or else you disengage your viewers. So I'm still trying to find out how to juggle these long-term projects. I've got two different ideas for video games I'd like to produce. I've got an idea for a full-length musical I'd like to produce, but it's just a matter of figuring out when to do those without totally hiatusing from YouTube. But as far as stuff you could actually see on my channel right now that's not the With Lyrics series, it's mostly me posting various original themes that I've done for video game soundtracks.
Excellent. Well, and I love your recent instrumental version of the Crash Man theme. Mega Man 2 is a big favorite of mine, so it was neat to hear your riff on that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's cool. Like when I get songs stuck in my head sometimes and I can't think of a lyric or the lyric's not ready, sometimes it's just fun to do exactly what I did in high school and college, which is just do a remix for my own enjoyment. But now what's cool is that the audience is big enough that if I do that remix just for my own giggles, that there's enough people that'll enjoy it that it's worth sharing. So I appreciate that you noticed that.
Enjoyed it. So let's go back to the video game industry for just a second here. What are some of the struggles that you see for people who are working either in the game industry or kind of doing some overlap where they're trying to dabble a bit into the gaming industry? What are some of the struggles they face today?
I think a lot of it is that there's an oversaturation of perfectly good indie games. And so because it's so oversaturated, you see a lot of people either cutting corners with cutting corners with what do I want to say here? Okay, a great example is freemium games. I hate the idea of freemium games because we left the arcade 30 years ago, and now they want us to keep pumping quarters into the machine. It's like, look, I'll pay $10 once if you'll just not make it where, well, you'll really enjoy the game if you pay another $1 and then another. I hate that. I also feel like I wish that I saw more games that really were art and really were deep storytelling. And I think that so often the lowest common denominator is considered when it comes to games. And so it's harder to make a game like BioShock or The Last of Us. But, you know, the BioShock series and The Last of Us are some of the games I've enjoyed most out of the past 2 years. I'm an adult now. You know, I like a good story. I like to feel like I'm shooting for a reason, not just, you know, trying to hit whatever's in my crosshairs. And so there's the issue of, you know, do we just play to the lowest common denominator, which is basically a 14-year-old kid, or can we transcend that? But really, you know, beyond that, I think it's just a matter of the oversaturation makes it very hard to set your game apart. There's much more pressure to have something really unique than I think there was, say, I don't know, in the 16-bit or even 64-bit era. You know, now that I think in a way it seems like the whole video store, maybe this is me going out on a little too far, but the thing about a Blockbuster video store is that if a lot of the games on the shelf had been already rented for the weekend and you just saw something where the packaging looked good enough, you couldn't hop on your phone and see what Metacritic said. You couldn't see what Polygon said. You just went, you know what, I'll try this out. And maybe it wasn't that great of a game, but if everybody's standards are a little bit lower, then their enjoyment is actually higher. Right now, everybody's so ready to jump on something and attack it because there's a whole cottage industry of attacking games. And frankly, I don't think I've done anything to help that. But it's true. So your game has to transcend all of the BS and all of the negativity that it's definitely going to get no matter what, then set itself apart, then get a fan base. It's a very tricky time, but I am looking forward to seeing how certain things like maybe the Oculus Rift or other VR helmet technology change things, or just going forward to see how, if we've hit a wall in terms of graphical quality, which it seems like graphics are not going to get that much better. I don't think consoles are moving to, you know, it's not the same as it used to be where it's like, well, it was 16, but now it's 32, and now it's 64. Now it's more like, what's the experience you're getting? What brands are you getting access to? And what are the ways in which we're going to play video games? That's what I'm interested to see. But I think that we're due for another, in the same way that the 3D changeover from 2D had a lot of great franchises making a lot of awful games because they didn't know how to do 3D with that character. I think that if the Oculus Rift and things like it become the norm, I think we're going to see yet again a whole learning phase, a whole transitional learning phase where a bunch of franchises we thought we loved totally biff it, and then new IPs begin because they make great use of the new technology.
Yeah, I'm still hung up on your reference to Blockbuster. I played so many bad games because of that exact scenario. Great box art, though.
Yep, that was back in those days. It almost seems like half their budget sometimes was the box art. Like, as long as it looks fun, as long as it's colorful, we need a lot of teal and purple, and they'll buy it.
So what about now? What games are you currently playing?
Well, I just got the Mario Kart 8 DLC, and so that's pretty fun. I actually am very glad they're doing that. When it came out, there was no mention yet of DLC, and my buddy Dan and I, who used to write a webcomic, we were like, dude, all they need to do is release DLC a few times a year, and this game will be like, it won't even need to be replaced for a long time. Like, and of course, every console tends to just have one Mario Kart, but still, way more bang for your buck. It just seems like they could just keep on going really as long as they want to, and people will just continue to. I love playing the retro courses. I love playing with new characters. Link actually handles much better than I hoped. So he might be my new guy. I like Toad a lot. I love the way Toad handles. But anyway, so Mario Kart 8. I'm playing the original Metal Gear Solid, unfortunately, nice. Which every time I've really, really tried to get into a lot of PS1 games lately, because that's like a big hole in my With Lyrics series, and so many PS1 games really were revolutionary at the time. The problem is most of them, the sequel that came later on the PS2 is actually what made people interested in the PS1 version. But Metal Gear Solid, it just feels like you're playing a silent movie or something. You're like, man, what is this, Citizen Kane? Like, this is such a different time, and yet I'm supposed to make it through now. But let's see, what else? I recently played a lot of Bubble Bobble. By the time this interview comes out, probably Bubble Bobble with Lyrics will be out. And I have been thinking about playing The Last of Us again, just because I couldn't come up with a concept at the time, so I just made a little quick webcomic about it. But it's such a great game, and it's had staying power now when they've remade it. And I feel like there's enough to it that if I could make a funny song about The Last of Us, maybe a love song about a zombie, I don't know, it could be worth it. So that's what's currently on my roster.
I think you're up to some great stuff there. We've now approached the very serious question segment of the interview, and changing completely in tone here. If you had to carpool with 3 video game characters everywhere you went, who would they be and why?
Well, if you're going to do a road trip with 3 people, you need flavors. You need the nice one who's going to try to make peace. You need the leader who's going to actually get people energized. You need somebody with enough cynicism and pessimism to make sure they're going to play devil's advocate when everybody's being a little bit too optimistic. So I would say Dr. Robotnik would probably be a pretty good, for the slot of the cynic and the pessimist. He's clearly good in a pinch with machines and whatnot. So if we break down, grab a wrench, Robotnik's now turned it into some kind of weird animal robot, but it runs like hell. Runs great. So then you have the leader. I think a good leader would probably be. Oh, I guess Leonardo doesn't count because he's a cartoon character. So how about I guess Mega Man. Like, I mean, he's pretty good at being a loner, but also he's tackled a lot of different situations. So Mega Man is the leader, and then as the nice one, probably Luigi. He's not quite as annoying as Mario, and he doesn't quite have the same shoes to fill constantly, pressure on himself. He's a bit of a scaredy cat, but will be nice to everybody and certainly a peacemaker. So I feel like Robotnik, Mega Man, Luigi. As far as me in a car with 3 guys, that would be, as long as Robotnik didn't try to turn us all into robots, we have a good time.
Sounds like quite the interesting trip there. Best wishes with that one. Well, let me ask you this. Where can people connect with you? Where can they follow what you're doing, keep track of everything you're up to? If they're interested in picking up your music, let's do the promo here. Plug away. I want to hear, how do we get your stuff?
Okay, so if you want to follow my internetage, Brentalfloss is my Twitter name, and it's like dental floss, but Brentalfloss with a B and an R. That's on Twitter. If you Google, or rather if you search Facebook for Brentalfloss, you'll find my official fan page there. Twitter is really the best way to follow me because I post way more on Twitter than Facebook. I also have an Instagram, and for reasons I won't go into, that is The Real Brentalfloss. Actually, I will go into them. There's this chick that looks like Miley Cyrus who decided to make her name Brentalfloss for no reason, and she hasn't posted in years, but bummer, can't get a hold of her. So that's my Instagram. As far as ways to get my music, really a Google search for Brentalfloss CD, as long as you intend on, paying with money, is a pretty good way to do it. You've got iTunes, also Bandcamp if you're into that. I'm on Deezer and Google Play and Xbox Music. And if it's a big aggregator of music, I've probably got my stuff on there. My newest album is called Philosophy. It has a lot of video games with lyrics, mostly from the 64-bit era on, but also some 16 and 8 as well. And but it's gotten to the point where Google searching Brentalfloss and whatever else you want to know is a pretty good way to do it. Just, maybe don't put in the words free or download or torrent. That would be great if you didn't mind.
All right. Well, thank you for your great thoughts and your time today. Greatly appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.